Hello, and welcome to John. What an absolute privilege.
Are we starting all over again?
Yeah, we start. Oh, no, that was the warm-up, John. Do you want to put your secret items on?
No, we'll carry on.
We'll carry on. All right. Yeah. It's so lovely to see you.
Isn't it lovely to see me?
It is lovely to see me. Thank you. Can we start at the 1960s? I read somewhere that you started off as a telecommunications engineer. That sounds very.
Well, you mean in life or in job?
In job, yeah.
Job. Yes, I worked for what was called then the GPO, which was the prior organisation to BT.
Right.
And I was an engineer, telephone engineer. Very good one, I might add. Brilliant. Sensational.
I imagine you were. So how did you go from that to hanging out with relatives of Beatles and getting involved in entertainment?
I had a friend called Michael Weinblatt, and he worked for Andre Bernard's in Liverpool. Also working in Andre Bernard's was Jimmy Tarbuck. What's his name that did the Persuaders? Colin, no. And this other chap called Michael. And one Saturday morning, Michael Weinblatt finished in the hairdressers on a Saturday morning about 3 o'clock. And they all got their wages and they got their tips. So he came away from Andre Bernard's. I used to meet him, and he'd have a big wad of pound notes, so like 20 to 30 pounds. I know, so he was quite well off. And he used to go to a place called Jackson's in Slater Street, which was an art shop, to buy paint and brushes and things like that. But he said on this particular Saturday, he had to go to a meeting in a cafe bar called the Jacaranda.
Right.
Where the Beatles used to play downstairs, but this is just a little bit prior to the Beatles, for a meeting. And would I mind? So I said no. So I went into the Jacaranda, and at the back was a group of people meeting. And he went and sat with them, and I sat at the front window and got my notebook out and started writing. And they were having a meeting, and I heard them saying, if only we knew somebody that had a typewriter. Rather surprising enough, I had a typewriter. Who's that?
Tom Bright.
Who's that? What are you doing?
That's Tom Bright. I think you know each other.
You're joking. Hello, Tom.
Oh, yeah.
How's Susie?
Girl, you know. How are you, John?
Have you still got the monkey in the garden?
Yeah. No.
Got rid of him.
She's a lovely one.
Too expensive in bananas.
Oh, it's lovely to see Tom there. Nice to see you. We'll come back to Tom later. John, I think you were in the middle of telling us that you were invited to something, a Tuesday meeting, because you were the only one who had a typewriter.
I've been telling people during the tea break about these wonderful evenings on a Tuesday. And this other chap called Michael that worked there said, oh, it sounds interesting. Is it all right? Can anybody go along? And he came along to one particular Tuesday, and it was introduced to me. And he said he'd like to take part. So that then became these regular Tuesday evenings with probably about 20 or 30 people would get up and entertain. That first night we had 105 people turn up, paying a shilling each to see the entertainment. And that became not just a regular feature there, but I also started to do it in the Jacaranda. I did it in the Blue Angel. We started to go around different venues. And there was a huge explosion of poetry clubs in Liverpool. And this led to, I wouldn't say a nationwide interest, but certainly a rather large local interest. And the Mersey poets came out of it. And we used to do down at this club called the Blue Angel. And the Blue Angel was where all the groups met after they'd worked the evening. There was reputed to be over 850 musical groups in Liverpool. And they would go down there after they finished gigging. And they'd all be there, Jerry the Bakers, the Beatles, Billy J. Crummer. They'd all turn up for an after-show drink. And we used to do it. I spoke to the owner of it. It was Alan Williams, who was the first Beatles manager, and he sold the Beatles contract to Brian Epstein for £10, and he made it. Became famous for the man who gave away the Beatles. Oh. And I persuaded him that we could put a show on there on a Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. He wouldn't let us do Friday and Saturday because of their busy nights. So we put these shows on, and from other 20 odd people that had played in the Everyman Theatre, I chose 8 to play because it was a small screen, small stage. And our title was The Liverpool One Fat Lady non-electric show. And one fat lady with bingo terminology for 8. So it was Liverpool 8, where we all lived, and non-electric because we didn't have guitars, we didn't have amplifiers, which all the
That
other
makes
people
sense.
had. And we went down really well. So Monday, Tuesday, and we got paid by Alan £1 a night between the 8 of us. That was £0.50 each,
No.
which in those days would buy a pint. One morning, there was a knock on my door, and I opened it. There was a chap called Rob Jones, who was a reporter for The People. And his girlfriend, Vivian Morris, was one of the 8 people that stood up on stage. And I'd chosen Roger, I'd chosen a chap called Michael, I'd chosen Adrian Henry, Jennifer Beattie, Celia Mortimer, Vivian Morris and myself. So there was and Mike Collins. So there's 8 of us. And he said that he'd been asked by ATV Television, Tom Brennan, who was from Crosby originally, ran this press agency in Manchester. And he'd rung up Rob and said, did he know of anybody in Liverpool that could do a comedy spot in a Saturday night television program? Because they had used a chap called Peter Maloney, and he used to do a little couple of minute comic insert. But he'd gone off to be a monk in Africa. And therefore that slot was free. So I said, well, yes. He said, well, can you ring this number, reverse charges, and speak to Tom Brennan? Which I did, and he explained that there'd been an article in the Liverpool Echo because of all this emphasis on Liverpool and all this people turning up for all this music. Liverpool City Council, in their finite wisdom, had thought it's not the sort of Liverpool that we want to have. We want to have a much better looking sort of Liverpool. And they're offering a prize of £2,000 to somebody who write a play about the nice Liverpool, Childwall, something like that. But of course, Tom Brennan, Beam and Crosby knew that Childwall produced nothing in terms of creative output. So he wanted somebody to come on the program and speak about this. So I said, okay. They sent a car for me, a limousine from Manchester to pick me up. Took me to Manchester. I did the insert. They paid me £12, 10 shillings. And I was on the dole at the time, getting £4, 10 shillings.
Wow.
So all this money. And I took along some scripts, and in the dressing room afterwards, or the green room, I did a little show for them. And they made them all laugh. Went back home. 3 weeks later, I got a telegram to ring Tom again, reverse charges, which I did. And he said there'd been this concern in Liverpool that there was no creativity other than music. Did I have any idea? I said, oh, in the box, I said, in the telephone box, well, I've got this idea about a Liverpool actor. And he comes on stage and he goes, to be or not to be? That is the question. Where is his noble in the minds to and I said, a voice off says, suffer the slings and arrows. All right, thank you. To suffer the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune, outrageous snowman. And Tom said, well, that sounds all right. I said, okay. But I said, but it takes 2 people. Because I was thinking I'd get Roger McGough involved as well. He said, yeah, that's no problem. So I put the phone down, ran round to Roger's flat, told him, and so we devised to do the sketch. They sent a car for us on the Saturday, a limousine, took us both to Manchester, paid us both £12, 10 shillings each. And then I said to Roger, we'll take along more sketches. And we did the sketch show for them in the green room again. As a result of that, a producer called Lloyd Shirley got in touch with me. He said they'd been doing this new program, a Saturday evening magazine program, and been doing some rehearsals and tests for it in London. Would we be interested? So I said, yes. He said, would you like to come down to London for an audition? I said, okay. So I said, well, there's 5 of us, because at that time, the 8 that we'd used on the Blue Angel, I put down to 5. So there's Roger, this chap called Michael, I never knew his surname, myself, Jenny Beattie, and Adrian Henry. We went down, we did the audition, and they were impressed with what we did. We came back up to Manchester to Didsbury, where they had a studio there. We did another audition. And I said, but before you make up your minds, we're doing a show at the Everyman Theatre on stage on Sunday night. Why don't you all come along and see us actually working? It might give you more ideas, which they did. And Sunday night, all these television people sitting on the front row all had suits on, looking very, very executive. We did the show. Afterwards, we went down to the Blue Angel to talk about it. And I sat under the stairs with Lloyd Shirley. They said, I think you guys, he was from Canada. That's why I said, you guys.
You guys.
I think you guys are great. He said, we have been working with other people in London, Sheila Fern and John White. They're both actors. He said, and I think, just hear me out, that it might be better initially for the three of you, you, Mike and Roger, to work with those two. And he said, the problem is, he said, when somebody, and because Adrian and Jenny were a little on the chubby side. So on television then, people, because the screen flattened people, they came over much wider. And he said, just try, we'll do a pilot show and we'll try it with John and Sheila and see what happens. So I said, yeah, okay. So we went to Manchester, did a pilot, and we got the series. And we were booked to do a series of appearance of 7 weeks, and we're being paid each £42 each. So I went being £4 something on the dole.
On the dole, yeah.
There was an option, if that worked, those 7 weeks, we'd do another 6 weeks, which is 13, and 13 is a quarter of 52, and that's how they worked those multiples. We went on to do 26 weeks, and we got a pay rise to £47 a week. So when it finished, when the series finished, I'd had like £1,600 in the bank. I was like really well off. I bought a car. So that's how it all started, by me going with Mike Weinblatt to a meeting in the Jacaranda and hearing somebody say, does anybody have a typewriter? And from that television series, we were booked to do the Edinburgh Festival. And from then, we just exploded. And here we are today.
That's amazing. I didn't know any of that, John. That's amazing.
Well, I shouldn't have told you then.
Oh, you had hits with Thank You Very Much, Lily the Pink, Liverpool Lou. We used to sing.
Do you remember?
Yeah, well, we used to sing in the school playground the theme to the Liverbirds.
Oh yes, what Scaffold legs, talks peculiar talks are all the choicest words.
That's right.
What Scaffold leg, the answer is two Liverbirds. Yeah, that was.
That's going to be my earworm today.
Well, that was done for a television series, The Liverbirds, which had Polly James and Nerys Hughes.
Nerys Hughes, yeah.
Yeah, they're brilliant.
That's wonderful.
Oh, and what's her name wrote the series? Carla Lane.
Carla Lane, who went on to do Bread. And
Carla and I almost got arrested by the police. We were in Williamson Square in Liverpool, and that time there were it's now a bus area, but then it was just a pedestrian area. And this van pulled up, and these theatre people got out and started doing a show, just performing, obviously plugging the show. And Carla and I had been for a cup of tea in Williamson Square. I was standing there watching, and then suddenly the whole gang of police cars and police vans arrived and descended upon these performers to arrest them. Well, Carla was incensed. Oh. And she said, yeah, they're not doing any harm. She walked over to these policemen. They're not doing any harm. Oh, just entertain me, And I was standing by her saying, it's all right, Carla. Don't try it. And she was getting more and more excited. And the policeman said, if you two don't move on, you'll be arrested. For loitering, whatever. So I had to drag her away from there. And that was just before she started writing the Liverbirds.
Yeah. Oh, so you knew her before then?
Oh, yeah. She used to be in a group that met in a place in Old Hall Street in Liverpool. So like the Liverpool Literary Society, and all these would-be and writers used to meet there once a week. Yeah.
You went on to form a sort of super group of Liverpool poets and other musicians called the Grimms.
Grimms, but the initial...
I do have the album, I'm not holding it up, but I think the green screen is taking it away.
Good. Well, Grimms was Gorman, Roberts, Innes, McGear, McGough and Stanshall. That was a combination of the Scaffold, Elements and the Liverpool Scene Band. And it was brilliant. We did a lot of tours. Well, the Scaffold did a lot of tours. And that was our main thing that we did in those days.
Yeah, that's excellent. Well, we've got a question from Metro Jam in the chat.
Who? Never heard of him.
Metro Jam is his nickname. I don't know what his real name is. But
Right.
he wants to know how you got involved in Tiswas. And I think it was something to do with Jasper Carrot.
Absolutely right. Jasper was very well known on the folk circuit, and he used to run several places in and around Birmingham, and he got in touch and said, would the Scaffold be interested in doing a week around Birmingham? So I said yes, and we appeared in a different venue each night and went down well. Then a few weeks later he rang me up and said, had I seen a program called Tiswas? I said, no. He said, well, it goes out in Birmingham and HTV, which is in Wales. That was the only two areas it went out, and I said, never heard of it. He said he had to leave this Tiswas program for 3 months. He was going out on tour and doing something. And would I be interested in taking his place? I said, well, I've no idea what it is, so what do I do? So he said, well, can I recommend your name to the producer, Glyn Edwards? I said, yeah, well, why not? Glyn rang me up and said, would I go to Birmingham and have a chat about it? Which I did. They paid me fare to go to Birmingham. They gave me money for going there. And I met Glyn, and he showed me some clips of the program. And I'd gone on a Friday night, stayed over the Friday night, and I watched the program in the studio on a Saturday morning. And I thought, it's bad. It's just totally bad. And it had Chris, Sally, and what was his name? Left. Trevor East. And they were the presenters. And afterwards I said to Glyn, well, yeah, I'd like to get involved. What would you like me to do? He said, well, we're particularly looking for ideas. So the plan was on a Monday morning, I would ring Glyn up with 10 ideas that they could use on the program, which I did. I couldn't see the program live because it didn't go out in the air. I was living in Suffolk. And religiously each week I sent the 10 ideas in. And then gradually Glyn said, well, would you like to be involved in some of the ideas? Because being the person I am, some of the ideas suggested me being involved. So I got invited over on the Friday, stayed Friday night, did the show on Saturday morning, just odd appearances. The series finished in May, and it went on a break. I had a phone call from Gail, who was the secretary for the program, said there's a new producer and would like to know if you'd be interested coming over to Birmingham to have a chat to the producer to see about a future of the program. So I said, yeah, okay. Paid my fare, paid me money to go, put me up in a hotel. Got into the office in ATV, and Gail said, oh, the producer's next door. Go out the first door on the right, and that's the producer. I knocked on the door to come in, and it was Chris, and he'd been promoted as producer, and Glyn pushed to one side. And he said, well, would you like to be involved? So I said, well, yeah. And that was, say, September, started the new series. And then it was still only going out. We did a 3-hour program, and it was only going out again in Birmingham and HTV. When we went on the Christmas break, which was in December, suddenly all the other television companies around the country decided they wanted to take Tiswas. Whether it had been sold by ATV or whether they managed to pick it up, whatever. And so when we came back out of the break, we were nationwide. Just the thing had just totally exploded. The only company that didn't take it was Time Teas. And eventually I worked with Time Teas and taught them a lesson. So we became nationwide, and it just exploded. It was just unfathomable. I mean, even last Thursday, I was shopping in Morrison's 8 o'clock in the morning to avoid the crush, and one of the shelf stackers came over and said, oh, are you John Gorman from Tiswas? I said, how old were you then? And it's being here now. You're thinking 40 years on, it's still in the public consciousness. It just doesn't make sense at all.
Can you explain that? Do you understand why?
Well, the very first sort of philosophy we had is that we didn't want to talk down to the children. We didn't want to do silly things just for children. We just wanted to do things for ourselves. And I think as a consequence of that, they carried out a survey of who watched the program, and 55% were over 18. Yeah. That to us was the success. So we were, if you like, we're being adult in our humor. but silly with it. I mean, the amount of people that wanted to go in the cage would be saturated. We had tax inspectors, we had police inspectors. The list of people wanting to go was just never stopped. I remember one particular week, a girl had appeared in the cage at the front, and she obviously was some sort of model. And I think her agent had said, "I can get you onto television, and I can get you into Tiswas." Ooh, Tiswas. Yeah. And the only place she could go was the cage. And she stood in front of this cage, and we looked at this spectacle of this beautifully made, wonderfully dressed model of a girl, and we just looked at each other and nodded. And for the rest of the program, she got everything, and she loved it. She absolutely
loved it. Yeah.
Oh, she did, because she was a centre of attraction.
I had a friend called Rachel, and she said she was a student at that time, and they used to meet in the student union every Saturday morning.
That's right.
And just watch it, even though normally they wouldn't get up on a Saturday morning. They did for Tiswas.
That's right. That's right. We heard a lot of that. In fact, we went on to do a tour.
I was there. I was at Wimbledon Theatre.
Really?
Yeah, the four.
So it was you.
Yeah, it was me.
But before we decided, we'd formed the Four Bucketeers, and I did the album.
I bought the cassette.
Oh, the cassette! Oh, posh. So we did this tour, but Chris and I said, well, we don't know what the reaction is going to be, because it's the first time we're out of the studio, we're in with the public, and are we vulnerable? We don't know. So we got a booking at Pontypridd University, Saturday night. And when we got there, met the social secretary, and he said, "We've built you a cage." So, oh, right. What the cage was just a front. There was no cage, it was just the front. And he said, also, we got some water for you. They had 200 buckets full of water, all at the side of the stage. Now, when we used water, what we had in the bucket was just a small amount, just a half an inch. Because when you throw it in such a way it looks quite a lot. But if you throw a bucket of water, and a pint of water weighs 1.25 pounds, and a bucket can have 8 pints. So you're looking at like 15 pounds weight. If you threw that in somebody's face, you could knock them out. Not that I'm against that, whatever's funny. So we said to him, "Oh, well, we need just use bucket." He said, "Oh, well, it's there anyway." Now we had, to get people into the cage, we had auditions, and we said, "Okay, anybody wants to go in the cage, come to the side stage, and you have to go through this audition." And we threw some water at them, and if they flinched, they couldn't go in the cage. But gradually the cage filled up. People, about 30 people in, and Chris and I were standing at the front, microphone, and the social secretary, seeing this, with all of you standing to one side, he picked up one of these full buckets of water, ran over to the cage and threw it, because he had friends in the cage. There's 15 pounds of water at the cage, and the cage shook. One of the people who'd seen him saw these buckets of water, ran out, and he got a bucket. And then it's like an explosion.
Is it a chain reaction?
Absolutely. All these people ran out, grabbed the bucket, and were throwing it at the audience. And Chris and I were just standing there. By this time, the PA had gone off, because it had just been completely sad. Then I said, "Come on, Chris." We went and sat at the side of the stage. There were some chairs, and we were just chatting. And as we were talking, all these students are running in and out. And they'd had a bath, a tin bath, with a hose pipe going into it so it could refill the buckets. And for about the next 35 minutes, the students were coming up from the audience. They were just throwing water everywhere. It was running off the stage like a waterfall. And at one point, the social secretary ran past, but to get another bucket, stopped and said, "Wait a minute, shouldn't you two be doing a show?" We said, "This is part of the show."
Yeah, you were doing nothing.
Oh, right. So what we realized then, that we needed, if we were going to do a show, we needed to have bodyguards. We needed to have security in front of the stage, particularly for Sally. I don't know why, but people fancied it. I just don't understand it at all. I think it must have been the wooden leg. Anyway, we did a tour, and one of the places we played at was the Leg of Mutton in Sheffield. It was up on the moors, and it was a very popular pub. And we did the show, went down a storm, And these bodyguards, the security, were standing in front, facing the audience, and they all looked quite tough. There was one on the end. At one point, when we were doing a bucket routine, the bucket of water song, he picked up a bucket and threw it at Bob, who was on the end. And Bob went, "No, don't, you know, it's not part of the show, you know what I mean, equipment." And he apologized. And we carried on. We finished the show, went into the bar, and the landlord had kept the bar open for the guest, and we were having a quiet drink. And there's a big suite of glass windows at the door. And these security people all started filtering past. And then we had all these engines revving, and it was a local bike gang called Muffo's Mob that had done security, that the landlord had organised, who used this as their pub. Then they knocked on the door, and the landlord came in. They all came in, and Muffo said, "Sorry about that chap, one of our men throwing the bucket. Anyway, we just taught him a lesson." That was all. He came up outside because he'd thrown the bucket of water. He sat down, surrounded by his henchmen. And I thought, I better sweeten the thing. And I said to the landlord, "Give us a tray of pints and I'll give it to Muffo." I went over and gave him, and he said, "Thank you." And then he reciprocated, so we was passing backwards and forwards. And at one point, one of his members had gone into the toilet, and there was a mop bucket in the corner which had some filthy water in it. And he picked up and came in and threw it at me. And Chris and I looked at each other and thought, what do we do? And there was a jug of water on the counter, so I thought, stuff it. And I just threw it at him, and Muffo went, "Yeah." So he ran over and he grabbed, and the next thing, we were all throwing water all over the place.
No.
And I thought, one wrong move, and he'd do to us what he did to the compatriots.
Were you scared?
Yes.
Yeah.
Because they could have turned like that. You know.
Oh, amazing.
And, well, yeah. But, you know, the tour was huge. I mean, I've got a photograph somewhere at Sheffield University. And you can see the water being thrown off stage, and it's just like a big rain cloud going over the stage. It's a brilliant photograph.
I don't remember a single child in the audience at Wimbledon.
Quite right. Why should they enjoy themselves?
Yeah.
I say we wouldn't have been able to cope with children.
No.
At that level.
Can I pass a couple of characters by you?
Go on then.
Me and my brother were in the audience in 1981 at ATV, and Smello came in, which was you, and I hadn't realised, but you really did smell. It was not you personally. I'm sure.
I do have feelings.
but
yes.
No, we had the full Smello effect.
That's right. Well, that's why it was called Smello. It wasn't, you know, it was a stage smell, honestly.
Yeah. Oh, I bet it was. Yeah. But it got a reaction from the kids. So.
But what impressed me was the bucket of water song, because it was obviously one of the key things for the program. Yeah. There was a lot of buckets of water involved, and the song became almost like an anthem.
Yes, it did.
The throwing water. We had this thing about saying, you know, throwing water is a piece of cake, and our rebus was, no, it isn't. There's a piece of cake, right? This is throwing water.
Oh my goodness!
Completely different. You know what I mean? But somehow or other, we record it as a single, and we try to get on top of the pops. But the BBC, because of Swap Shop, they had a record out, and obviously the BBC wanted to favour their record. They said, no, we couldn't be on top of the pops because only songs which are in the top 30 could be in. So, right. Well, we went in at number 26.
Excellent.
And it was so brilliant.
Yeah.
And the smile on Chris and Sally's face that we appear on top of the pops, singing our hit song, all because of this Saturday morning program that had, to us, not saying it had no consequence, but it was a job. It was a job which we enjoyed doing.
It was
and then
wonderful.
You find yourself suddenly doing nationwide tours, appearing on top of the pops. It was just like completely different to what we'd set out to be.
And Circle Sonic in the chat wants to know if it's true that Neil Innes from the Grimms and Bonzos recorded the Four Bucketeers or produced.
It was the
Four
producer,
Bucketeers.
yeah.
Yeah.
He didn't do the Bucket of Water song. That was done by Columbia Records. But he did the whole of the other. He did the whole of the LP. Yeah, Neil, poor old Neil, lovely man.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
I've got a question I've been dying to ask you because we don't.
Is it about money?
Yeah, it's what you owe me. So
Yeah.
no, it's not that. It's how did you prepare for Saturday mornings during the week? How was the script writing and the getting the running orders ready and rehearsing?
Yeah, we didn't take it, let's say, seriously. Chris and I used to go to a club that had been recommended to us by the Irishman,
Frank Carson.
Frank Carson. He said, "Hey, you want to go down there? It's a great club. It does see you right." And we'd sit down and, without thinking, we'd be sitting on the table and we'd say, "We can not stop this idea, and then you're going to do this," and plotting it out. And one morning we came out and it was 7 o'clock in the morning.
No.
I know, it was still
you were
light.
on air in 3 hours.
It was still light. We thought, how did that happen? Because we got so carried away in all the different, because there were so many different elements going on. And the program may have seemed to have been a little haphazard. And there was a certain degree of freedom, obviously, because if you throw a bucket of water, you don't know what the consequences are going to be. So there was that element to it, but nevertheless, you had to have a beginning. You had to say, how do we open the show? And how do we go through the show? And how do we end it so we get maximum impact? So that all had to be devised, strangely enough. And so that was, that's how seriously we took it. Well, it wasn't the fact that we would go down a club and throw everything together. We just wanted to get away from the studio, to get away from the office and sit down somewhere. But that taught us a lesson when we came out at this time of the morning. That's not working. So we used to meet Friday, all day Friday was spent really putting the show together. And then we did a sort of camera rehearsal. When we went nationwide, we had to go down to 2 hours rather than 3 hours because the camera crew, then they were paid in blocks. So because it was a net local, the 3 hour block was okay. But when it went network, it became a 3 hour block. And they wanted to get double money. So we said, budget can't afford that. Just can't be done. So we said, well, we'd do it down to 2 hours. And that was, in a way, that was probably better because you concentrate your material out better in 2 hours rather than 3 hours.
Okay. Well, I've got to ask you, because following on from the Four Bucketeers album and the Four Bucketeers tour, I think you and Chris decided to, and I've got this T-shirt here of OTT. You want to tell us how OTT happened?
Certainly. I got a T-shirt of...
Never heard of it.
Oh, you see, I can beat you with this T-shirt.
Can you beat me with this one then?
Oh. Oh, corner.
Oh, boss.
And when we did the tour, we had to have our own T-shirts.
Merchandise. Oh, the Beat. That's the Beat logo.
Yeah. So what?
OTT.
Oh yeah. Well,
do you reckon it was a success or ahead of its time?
It was ahead of its time and a success. We used, after we'd finished the program, we used to go in the bar and relax. And this was 1982, so we've been doing really well. And I'd said to Chris, idly, do you know, our material in the main is adult, but we can't make it adult in the accepted sense because children are watching. You know, not that we want to do anything untoward, but just that feeling, you know, being cleverer with words or what have you. So what we should think about is doing the Saturday morning and then doing one in the evening for more adult people. And we talked about, and we thought, oh, all right, we could do that, and we could call it Big Tiz. That was the original idea. Now, I'd gone to see, I was, as well as writing and for it, I was also the talent scout. I was also the creative consultant, the researcher. I used to research out little filmettes that we did. And I was going down around the country looking for talent. So I saw Tom Bright in club in Stowmarket with Susie. And
Now, Tom did a song about a flasher, I think.
Wouldn't surprise me. So keep your clothes on, Tom. And I'd gone down to London and heard about the Comedy Store, and I went along, and a chap called Alexei Sale.
Oh, he was wonderful.
Brilliant, absolutely brilliant. And he was
And a Liverpudlian.
Of course. And I watched him perform, and I thought he'd be brilliant on television. He hadn't done television before, so I spoke to him afterwards, and I said, would he be interested? Got in touch with his agent, and we booked him to do that. We're going to do a series of 13 programs. But he could only do the first 7. He had to go and do a tour he was committed to do.
Yeah. Was it Australia? I think it was Australia.
Somewhere like that.
Yeah.
And he was the first person to use the word semen on television. Because in his routine, he said, and the seats are covered in semen. And because there was a sort of like a stunned reaction in the audience. And today, if you didn't say it, you'd be in trouble. But to then, it was untoward.
And it was a live show, wasn't it?
Absolutely. 11 o'clock at night, pubs had finished, but pubs were staying back to watch. They were locking the doors and people were staying to watch the program. It was very successful. The problem was, and I'm not mentioning a name, but there was a certain reporter who worked for a newspaper who'd been very kind to Tiswas, big fan of Tiswas, and for some reason, he turned on the program. He didn't like its content. I'll give you an example. We were doing a recording in a church. I got permission from that song, I went to your wedding, although I was dreading the thought of seeing you, Stan Freberg song, which Alexei was going to sing or do something with it. And we were all in the vestry, working out what we're going to do, the cameras being set up, and suddenly came in and somebody said, a funeral has just arrived. I said, what? So the funeral's just arrived and they're coming in. So I ran out the back to the vicar's house, knocked on the door, and I said, there's a funeral arrived. We haven't got one booked. And you could see the gate, see the hearse pulled out, and I was bringing the coffin out, starting to bring it up the pathway to the church. And he ran out to speak to them, and they were at the wrong church. It was right down the road. So he sent them packing. The paper reported that we had stopped a funeral.
Oh, how rubbish.
Absolutely. And it was all that sort of attack, and that got picked up. People complained to the IBA. People who hadn't seen the program, but picked up on this sort of thing to the IBA, the Independent Broadcasting Authority. And they said that with the scripts, and it was just Chris said, as the producer, the scripts have to be vetted. And he said, we're not doing anything. It's just normal. But nevertheless, they came down with a heavy hammer. When the series finished and we wanted to do another one, because as far as we're concerned, been successful, they said, we couldn't use the title OTT. They banned the title. And then all the scripts, regardless, had to go to the IBA first to be vetted. So Chris said the word beginning with B to a lot of you, and we decided sort of thing. And we decided to do another different type of program, which we call Stayback, which was good, but it lacked that attack that we'd had with OTT.
Yeah, John, you were on the credits for that, but we never saw you performing. Were you sort of a researcher or a scriptwriter?
Oh, I was everything. I say, a talent scout, creative consultant.
On Stayback, yeah.
No. Oh, well, on Stayback
sorry,
as
on
well.
Saturday Stayback. Your name was always in the credits, but
but by that time, the program being reduced down to like half an hour, and we had guests coming on, and we had Kevin Ceesay, which I lost track with him altogether. He was brilliant.
Was he the singer with the guitar? Yeah, he was good.
Don't know whatever happened to him. Clive Webb and I were going to be his agents, and we tried, but he just totally disappeared. And Lem Ceesay, who goes out doing poetry, I keep wanting to go to one of his gigs and saying, do you have a cousin or relationship called Kevin? And where is he? So because of that, because we'd reduced the program down to 30 minutes, and I was, if you like, better off in the background doing the research and getting it than appearing on it, because We only did, I think, 7 programs altogether.
Yeah, I thought they were very good, but it's a shame it didn't go on for longer.
Well, I say, Chris, quite rightly, as the producer, creator, said, I can't work like this. He said, he actually said, I'm never going to do television again. And he went down to London and ended up doing the radio program.
Yeah. And I think you helped him with that, didn't you?
Yes, I wrote a lot for
radio.
him. That's the one.
Yeah.
I wrote a thing particularly for him called Dick Tarrant Special Agent, which in 1992 won the Sony Award for Best Use of Comedy on the Radio. And we had to go to this ceremony and receive the accolade. So that worked really well.
Yeah. Can I ask you one more question? I was there at Tiswas Reunited. The highlight for me was Albert Grumble running up and down the stairs and harassing people. Oh, you've got Albert Grumble. Albert Grumble, who's been in all the world wars.
Don't you talk to me about television. I'll tell you now, I was fighting in 17 world wars just so that people like you can get on television and do your silly nonsense stuff. I had to go over to all different places in the world to fight, to give those people liberty and freedom. And all you do is stand on television things and make absolute utter nonsense the whole business. Apparently.
Was that based on a real person?
I don't know.
You don't know? Obviously not then. Yeah. How did Tiswas Reunited come about?
It's based on when the Scaffold used to do these regular annual shows at the Everyman Theatre, and I won't say the person's name, but there's this particular person who was responsible for the general sort of maintenance of the theatre. He used to get quite upset with performers, doesn't have to just be us, because they messed the place up. He'd spend all day cleaning the whole thing, and then performers would come on, the audience would come in, and there'd be papers and stuff. And he'd come and blame the act. And he'd come up and say, you bloody people, you don't think about us cleaners. But he wasn't that extreme. He was just sort of, oh, well, you'd think you have better things to be doing.
I'm knocking at the door, and we must answer. Sadly, it's time for us to say au revoir, but hopefully we'll see you next week. I'll be here if you'll be there. And don't forget, you come over there because I'll stay there. And you can come here. We'll see you again next time.
It's not going to happen. There's no way.
Bye-bye.
The police is to fight crime with a smile. Now, what's got 4 legs and flits from branch to branch? Go on.
I don't know. What's got 4 legs and flits from branch to branch?
2 co-op managers.
It's actually pretty good.
What I do, you see, is I stand outside a bank, and if bank robbers come along and run in and rob the bank, when they come out, I get my joke book out and I read them a joke, and they fall about laughing, and they give up crime. So,
a charity single. Do you want to tell us about that?
well, apparently somebody that works for Radio Kent had contacted a colleague in London that did poetry programs to say, why don't the Scaffold redo the Thank You Very Much record for the NHS? That person in London contacted Roger. He got in touch with me. I got in touch with Mike, and then we sat down and put our collective heads together online, 6 meters apart or whatever it is.
Yeah.
And we wrote a version to suit it. We couldn't obviously go to a studio, so we had to record it, like people have to do now these days, over the internet. And that was all put together in a studio in Birkenhead with Alex and Jerry. And they put it together and produced the result, and it just can't tell the difference. It's amazing, isn't it? Absolutely amazing.
I listened to it yesterday. It's fantastic.
It is good. It is good. And
I
mean, people are listening to it. It's getting reaction, and we're adding to that general thing. I wanted to walk 100 times around the garden singing it, but somebody beat me to it.
Oh, you should have been dressed as Albert Grumble.
Good idea. Well done.
John, it's been an absolute pleasure. I can't tell you how happy this has made me, especially your impressions.
You see that?
Yeah.
That's the top television program Tiswas. Now, I've had that, as you can imagine, for quite a long time. And I just wondered if there was any way that this can be passed on and sold for the NHS.
Yes.
Have a think about it. Let me know.
Can we get back to you, John? We're going to take you up on your kind offer, and we'll have a really happy rest of the lockdown. And I look forward to reading about you walking around your garden. Singing, that's right.
You'll never walk alone.
It's been great.
That was brilliant. He sang You Never Walk Alone, doesn't it? Liverpool anthem.
Great. And Tom Bright's been waiting patiently. I think we're going to interview Tom Bright now.
Well, good. So you should.